Flipper Baby Productions presents the Cinema Shame Podcast.
I can't give a man nearly killed by dogs such an inhuman message.
What's human or inhuman is not for human decision. Now you get out there and interrogate him.
No matter what you think you've seen, you'll find it's not enough. No matter what you think you know, you won't get through. Lordy, it's a sympathetic work to rise your smock above the kirk. But no matter where you hide or what you're more than you. No matter how that film is shown, what always ends the same. Although the strain will fly the same, where's downtown? Where you get fed for real as you kick up every heel. But no matter what you do, they're gonna take you down. Lord, it's a shame down, rain town, tame down. Everybody wants another crowded line. All men, all 10, fall 10. You are busted. Let down your guard.
I'm so happy you're joining us today on the Cinema Shame Podcast because we've got a doozy of an episode coming at you to kick off the brand new, penitence-embracing, shame-obliterating third season of the podcast. You may have noticed our brand new theme song. Opening the show was a friend of mine. He's an amazing blues musician by the name of Preacher Boy. He humored me by recording a Cinema Shame riff on Bob Seger's Shakedown. Do me a favor and check out more of his music at preacherboy.com. He released a new album last fall by the name of Rumble Strip. And I'm not just saying this because I know the guy and he's a crazy talented poet and blues man, but it's a damn fine record and you should own a copy. My name, as ever, is James Patrick. We're joined today by my friend Allan Mott. Allan owns the posters for all but one of the Roger Corman Nurse movies and owns 6 Stereo F Santiago movies on Blu-ray. If you don't know who that is, look him up on the interwebs because it'll likely put our conversation today into some kind of perspective. He also does some writing, including a dozen books, one of which is a book about scary movies called, wait for it, Scary Movies. You can find him at House of Glib on Twitter and Vanity Fair on Letterboxd. He's also watched the pirate movie every weekend for an entire year, and I think that, all that makes him the perfect. Hang on, you don't get to refute that.
No, I'll just say I was 11 years old.
I don't need any context. All that said, that makes him the perfect guest to talk about an amazing, unbelievable, atrocious, and unforgettable 1968 film that goes by the name Boom!
Boom.
Boom. Allan, did you know that you were the first guest to be to kick off my arbitrarily delineated season 3 of the Cinema Shame Podcast?
I think you mentioned it. Yeah, I think I was honored, but I was trying to play it cool.
You got it. How does that make you feel leading off with a brand new season? But here's the big kicker. With a movie that no one would actually feel ashamed about not having watched.
Well, and that's very on brand for me because when sort of you asked, I could probably name 100 movies that would more typically fit the description of Cinema Shame. And yeah, no, I haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia. I haven't seen Raging Bull. I've owned Raging Bull on DVD for at least 10 years now, and I still haven't watched it.
Well, it doesn't count unless you've owned it on 3 different formats.
Yeah. So to me, like the idea of like shame, like being ashamed of not seeing something isn't really sort of a factor in my life. I'm kind of a film contrarian a lot of times. But in this case, there was a case of a film that, for a specific reason we'll get into later, I did feel legitimately bad that it had taken me this long to get off my butt and get a copy and see it.
And this kind of, we talk about the nature of shame on this podcast a little bit, and it should be known by now that the shame is not necessarily the guilt, because we don't believe in the guilt. It's not about guilty viewing of movies you should have watched. This is a way for us to view movies that, you know what, at this point in my life, I should have seen this particular movie, and gosh darn it, this is what's gonna take to get me to watch it. Because, you know, on the first episode of the show, we did Will McKinley and Police Academy. And, you know, that's probably the closest approximation to Boom that we've had on the podcast, because at this point, I guess that was 2017 when we started it. Nobody in 2017 walking around saying that Police Academy was a wildly relevant movie to watch.
Which actually, I would argue that if you want to look at a film that effortlessly does diversity, it is very relevant.
Well, there you go. See, we've resurrected Police Academy. Now it's required viewing for all serious cinephiles, even ones that weren't alive in the 1980s, to know how amazing those movies were at that point in time. Because I gotta tell you, I was on the wait list for Police Academy 6 for a long time before I finally got to rent that at my video store.
That's City Under Siege, right?
Yes, City Under Siege, which I think is probably the most underrated of the series, but we can talk about that another day.
Yeah.
It really does get a bad rap. Okay, I'll stop now. This is the obligatory question. I understand it may not apply in the same way for this particular movie. It's not like we're talking about Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Why did it take you so long to jump on the Boom bandwagon?
Well,
now it's officially a bandwagon, right? I mean,
yeah.
this movie is
the
really
Blu-ray
getting
is
steam,
finally coming out. The
which
Blu-ray
is
is finally coming out. Yeah.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't available, as probably we'll mention, in any format anywhere except on VHS.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a burn on demand in terms of like the DVD.
Universal burn on demand disc, which I proudly own.
Yeah, and okay, here's the story, and this is my whole explanation of why sort of Boom was the movie that I thought of when you came to me. It was because I started as a movie lover through the reading of books. My origin story as a cinephile is I'm around 11 years old, and I'm in the library, and there's a section. I discovered a section in the library that's dedicated to nothing but movie books, and I love movies, so I'm excited. But the thing that cemented and made me a lifelong movie fan was I grabbed Danny Perry's Cult Movies 2 completely at random off the shelf, and I completely opened it randomly. And I opened on the page for the first nudie musical, and there was a naked lady in this book. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly realized there were books in the library with naked ladies in them, and they were movie books. And so I took out every movie book that I could find in the hope of finding more naked ladies. And
so this is sort of like how people become anthropologists by reading
National Geographic. Yeah.
Yes.
And it was a case where I was like sort of a goody two shoes, so I couldn't just take out the books and look at the pictures. If I took out the books, I had to read the books, and I quickly realized that my favorite of these books were the ones that were sort of about outsider cinema, about sort of midnight movies and that sort of thing, which inevitably led me to the Medved books. And for younger readers who might not be aware or only know of like sort of Michael Medved as that, idiot who, usually comes up with the worst possible take at any given time. They were a series, like the Medveds were basically responsible for sort of the Ed Wood cult, because they wrote this book called the Golden Turkey Awards. And in it, they were basically the first ones to spotlight Ed Wood as the worst director of all time, which now anyone who knows anything about movies thinks is probably unfair. But at the time, it was sort of like, hey, did you hear about this guy in this movie, Plan 9? It was big and it was huge. And it's only in retrospect now that you look at these books and they're sort of like the cinema sins of like that era. They were basically very snarky and snotty, and they weren't written with a lot of love. It was very sort of like judgmental and sort of like, yeah, these movies are awful and they suck. And it was through these books that I discovered Boom, and I think it was in their book about flops, where they talked about all the money that was spent on it and what a waste of time it was and how terrible it was and how awful, it was just on every single level. And I took that to heart and just assumed, oh, okay, this is a terrible movie, and based on the description of it, I probably wouldn't like it, and I'm never gonna see this.
Based on the description of it, nobody would like it.
Yeah, and it wasn't until a few years later that I read I can't remember, was it Crackpot or Shock Value? One of John Waters' books, where he talks about it, and he talked about it as if it was one of the greatest movies ever made. And as sort of a young kid, that was mind blowing to see something that you had previously only heard of as a disaster be suddenly described as this amazing, glorious thing. And it seems like a simple thing, but it's actually a complicated thing that I don't think, like, basically, if you go on film Twitter now, a lot of people don't seem to be aware that the exact same reason why they hated a movie passionately is the exact same reason why I loved it passionately. It's not like I don't love it despite the reasons why you hate it. I love it for those reasons. And that was sort of my first exposure to that concept, that it is possible for a movie to touch people so completely differently that one person will be like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And someone else will see the exact same thing and go, this is amazing. This is glorious. This is wonderful. And because of that, like, I always wanted to see Boom, but because, like, as you mentioned, it was extremely hard to find. And it wasn't until you pointed out, oh, there's actually a burn on disc for it available. Like, it was a case like I would have seen Boom as soon as I had a chance. It's just I never came across it. Like, I never had the chance to see it. So it was sort of like when you pointed out that disc, I immediately bought it and was like, okay, this is what we're doing.
And then they announced the Blu-ray like a week later. But
exactly, yeah.
You put it over the top. So this is a movie that I think has a lot going for it in terms of perspective.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Medved built it as one of the worst movies ever made. So you take that going in and you watch it, and you could totally walk out, same person, right, that was abominable. I'm never going to, have to deal with that again, thank goodness. But then you have champions of films that have, we'll call them problems at the moment and then move along. Like John Waters, who takes viewing bad movies to another degree because of the way he looks at filmmaking, the way he looks at the experience of movie watching.
Yeah.
So my first exposure to Boom was in Robert K. Elder's compilation book, The Best Film You've Ever Seen, where he has directors talk about movies that they love that were considered flops or bombs or disasters. And he interviews John Waters. And in it, we're talking about the perspective. So here's a quote from Waters in this selection. He says, "You can watch that movie 100 times and never know if Losey meant it to be camp. Camp isn't the right word. Camp means so bad it's good. This is not so bad it's good. This is so bad it's art. This is so bad it's confusing. Or this is so great it's confusing. You don't ever know the tone of it. It is to this day mysterious to me."
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that take because there are moments here where that do feel like that fit my definition of camp. But then there are also other moments here where I get the sense that what I'm seeing is exactly what they wanted to do. It wasn't accidental. That it's a style that may be alienating to some, but this is 100% what they wanted to do. And so it jumps around like that, where you have these moments where it's like, did they really think that would work? To, oh, okay, they 100% knew exactly what was going on here. And that's what I found like sort of fascinating watching it was is that you can't say that it is like 100% a misfire. Like, I think a lot of what they wanted to do, they actually did. It's just a case where what they wanted to do was at that place and time so sort of avant-garde and unexpected and just sort of outside of the zeitgeist that it seemed like bizarre and like a mistake. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that in 1968, the sort of what we would call the gay camp aesthetic was very much underground, whereas today, Drag Race, stuff like that, that sort of that sort of high theatrical aesthetic is very much a part of popular culture. So watching it today, like sort of moments that would have stood out as just being completely absurd, we can now appreciate them on the level they were actually meant to play at.
There is just a goldmine of just individual moments that you could go through and try and sort and put them into the intentional mistake or just bizarre.
Yeah.
Throughout this movie. And that's what Waters is really talking about here. The pieces that you just can't quite wrap your head around. And their movies don't do that. Now, we can get into a whole argument, and I think we will in a little bit, about what Losey actually wanted to do with this movie.
Yeah.
But
but also, like, I'm not sure that I'm going to consider Losey the true author of this.
Oh, no.
I feel this is 100% Tennessee Williams.
This is the purest distillation of Tennessee Williams on screen.
This is like the thing I love about Tennessee Williams is that you could show someone like 3 plays of his, and they'll go, "Oh my God, this guy is the greatest playwright of all time." And then you could show them 3 other plays of his, and they would go, "Oh my God, this guy is the worst playwright of all time."
He never made it out of community theater.
Yeah. So it's sort of like and to me that is the greatest sign of genius, is that you either hit it out of the park and it's a home run, or it's a total strikeout. There's no in between. There's no mediocre Tennessee Williams. It's either genius or it's the worst thing ever.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump into talking about this movie and all its glory, I wanted to play a little warm-up game with you.
Yeah.
Because if we keep this to the end, people might tune out. You know, people tend to do that, and I think this is a very opportune time to talk about punctuation, specifically the exclamation point in cinema. I've prepared a small quiz for you. Okay. Regarding the exclamation point in movie titles. Now, I did a little digging, and I came up with 52 movies that feature exclamation points. 52. It includes sequels. There are some that double up because they were sequels to movies with exclamation points. Now, can you name one of the 4 movies that contain 3 exclamation points in the title? And I'm going to give you Faster Pussycat Kill because that's low-hanging fruit.
Tora.
That is one. Very good. Very good. That's many internet points for you. The other 2 are Kill. Sad end to Gene Seberg's career. Kill. And Banshee, which I had to look up because I had never heard of. Banshee, exclamation point. It is not remarkable. Based on what I read, you do not need to seek it out. It is merely a footnote on the exclamation point conversation. Now, for your final test. This is overkill. I was at my daughter's karate practice yesterday.
Yeah.
And while I sat there, I looked up the Letterboxd ratings. This is important.
Yeah.
The Letterboxd ratings for every movie with an exclamation point.
Yeah.
So you've seen Family Feud.
Yeah.
And there'd be a top ranking. So this is the Shamely Feud. This is the highest rated movies with exclamation points.
Okay.
There are 8 of them with at least a 3.6 or higher. How many can you name?
I'm going to guess Airplane is in there.
Airplane is in there.
Or Airplane!
Airplane, exclamation point. Play along at home. The home
Three
game,
Amigos?
The Three Amigos was just shy of the...
Shy?
Yeah, it did not make the top 8 list.
Faster Pussycat, Kill.
It did not make the top.
Did not make... Okay. I'm disagreeing with...
Again, Letterboxd. I figured it was at least better than doing the IMDb ratings.
Yeah. I Want to Live?
That was one of them.
Okay.
That's 2.
Like, there are some that I'm thinking of, but I wouldn't think they would, like Mamma Mia, I would necessarily think would make the top 8.
All right, not Mamma Mia, but...
Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again?
Yeah. I was a little bit shocked, because at first I was like going to brush right over both of them, but then when I saw Mamma Mia had a 3.3 rating, I'm like, I gotta at least do my due diligence here and look up the sequel. And the sequel slotted right in there.
if you look at the sequel, you'll see a 5-star rating by Allan Mott, because I love that movie.
I thought it was tremendous too, and I hated the first one.
Yeah. Moulin Rouge?
Moulin Rouge is included, yes. That is 4.
4? Mm-hmm. Oliver?
Oliver was not.
Oh, I mean...
That was 3.5, just outside.
Wow. The Naked Gun?
Naked Gun was the one I would have guessed.
Okay.
There's 4 remaining, right? 3 remaining.
Well, if we're going Zaz movies...
4 remaining.
Is Top Secret in there?
Top Secret was not in the top. It was just beneath.
Oh, Help.
Was just below.
Just below. Okay,
there was a whole
I am
slew.
so... Because everyone now that I'm thinking of would never make it to, to Viva Knievel and...
I didn't even have that
Burn.
one. I didn't have Viva Knievel. I didn't have that one on my list, so there's 53.
Yeah.
53, roughly 53.
And What a Way to Go, and I think I'm beginning to exhaust my...
Yeah? You want to phone a friend? Do we have those capabilities on this show? I don't know if we do. I don't know if our budget's high enough for that kind of stuff. You're still missing the number 1.
The number 1?
The number 1 rated exclamation point.
Hey, this might be a case where I extremely disagree with its placement.
It's a silent film.
Oh, Safety Last.
Yes. Yes. And
I guess I shouldn't have I shouldn't have doubted the pretension of the average letterbox.
And let's see. Okay, 1 is a music documentary.
I don't know.
Anvil! Exclamation point! The story of Anvil.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Another one was directed by Fritz Lang.
Okay, I'm
Hangmen Also Die! Exclamation point.
Okay, yeah, no, I would not have guessed that one.
And the last one... Oh, actually, no, there's one more hiding. I stand corrected. At 3.8, we had Oh Lucky Man! Exclamation point.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Which I've never seen.
I have, and I would not put it higher than a lot of the films that I just mentioned.
Right. And then the final one is Goodbye Lenin! Exclamation point, which also features a comma.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would not put that behind a lot of the films I've already mentioned.
I really like that movie, but yeah, in terms of like Top Secret and I mean That Darn Cat. I mean, what's wrong?
And now for your final exam.
Which of the movies had the lowest letterbox rating?
Oh.
It is a very long name, and it also features 2. It has 2 exclamation points and a question mark.
Is it? I'm gonna have to Google the name just because saying the name. I think I have. We'll see if even. Oh no, because the one I was thinking of was Can Hieronymus Merkin ever forget Mercy Hump and find true happiness? But that just has a question mark.
That's just a question mark. I'm sorry.
Or is it? I'm thinking of crazy long titles now.
It's the right length though.
No, I think I have an idea, but I can't. Is it the Steckler film, the Crazy Mixed Up Zombies?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I was never gonna be able to. I was like trying to look, but even trying to Google the full title, it was like not giving me anything.
For the record, the title is called "The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies."
Mixed Up Zombies. Okay. Yeah.
Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Question mark.
Well, and we can even debate whether or not Boom counts as an exclamation point title, because the exclamation point is on all the posters,
right?
But it's not actually in the movie.
But I suppose it's better than the other titles that they had.
Yeah, the milk train doesn't stop here anymore.
The milk train doesn't stop here anymore, which is the title of the original play.
Yeah.
And then it had Go Forth, I believe, was a title in between before they finally settled on the profound Boom. And I believe I read, I haven't noticed it in the actual film, but they took out one mention of the milk train doesn't stop here anymore. You can see Richard Burton saying the line, but they and then which is weird because then she says it later. Exactly.
So if he had actually said it, that line would have made more sense.
Like, if you're going to cut out one because it's ridiculous, why did you leave it in at the most crucial moment of the movie? And I'm like, well, that's just strange.
Well, and that's because when we get to me that is a great moment until that line, which seemingly comes out of nowhere, and it's sort of because there's it made me laugh because there's this sort of popular internet meme about people getting excited when the title of a movie is said in the movie. Where in this case, you get the title of the movie said in the movie, but you also get the title of the play said in the movie.
Right. Bingo for movie titles, I suppose. Now, let's dig into the movie.
I need myself a lover. Don't reach for a smoke. Wait till I offer you one.
May I have one?
Kiss me for it.
Since Cat on a Hot Tin Roof has Tennessee Williams created such raw passions, such startling, striking characters devoid of all hypocrisy and inhibitions.
Is this a time for kissing?
Not since Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf have Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton been so emotionally explosive.
Vicious lies, but malicious distortion.
That's not true. He was in your bedroom by invitation.
She was rich, demanding, shameless, domineering, but in the depths of her soul, as frightened as any one of us.
Die! Mrs. Guilford! Don't leave us!
He walked the vague line between lust and saintliness.
I get panicky when I've nobody to care for.
Is that so? You seem to be setting yourself up as a saint of some kind.
She had used her body as a stepping stone to wealth and domination. Now she wanted this stranger. Could she take him on his terms?
How many times do you have to be invited into a lady's bedroom?
Today I'm trying to show a film that is very, very important to me, that really personifies my taste. This film I showed to future dates on my first date. If they don't like it, I can never go out with them again, really. It's the best failed art movie ever. It's called Boom. It's a ridiculously retitled Tennessee Williams play, The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. It stars Elizabeth Taylor as Sissy Goforth, the richest woman in the world. It is the ultimate drag queen role. Rupert Everett even did it on the stage in London a few years ago and played the same part. I can never forgive my parents. It was a play, and it came to Baltimore when I was 12, and it starred then Tallulah Bankhead and Tab Hunter. And my parents didn't take me to see it, which I think is child abuse, basically. It also stars Richard Burton as the Angel of Death, who has the unfortunate habit of calling on wealthy women the day before The Undertaker. It was directed by Joseph Losey, a director I like very much, that if I ever had to get a director tattooed on, I think it would be Joseph Losey. And I like his failed art films the best. Failed art films seem to be a genre today that we don't see anymore, because now the independent film in America takes all the screens for all the foreign films that we used to see, so we don't get to see as many failed art films. this film, this is probably the biggest audience this film has ever had. It was a huge flop when it first came out. It just was released on video for the first time. It's already out of print. It was in print for about 5 minutes. There used to be only one print of it in the world, and I used to tour with this movie to film festivals and present it. It was a giant flop when it came out. They had it called Boom, and then it didn't work, so they retitled it Boom with an exclamation point, which is the most pitiful marketing I ever saw in my life. You know, Joseph Losey bragged that he was the first director to ever lose money with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton with this film. And he talked about in his book how every day on the set they started off with Bloody Marys. So basically they all made this film drunk. I think that is one of the reasons. But Elizabeth Taylor's performance is staggering in it. Just watch her performance, and it really influenced the Divine and I. We used to watch this all the time when we were young. And I finally met Elizabeth Taylor. I went to her house to a cookout. And I think I was invited because her staff, she has an all-gay staff, and they like my work. I think that's why I got invited. So I walked in and I said to Elizabeth Taylor, "Oh, I love Boom." And she said, "That's a terrible film." She got really angry at me and thought I was insulting her, which I really got upset. I thought she was going to throw me out. And she looked like Divine, kind of, you know. And I don't mean that badly, because Elizabeth Taylor was Divine's idol. I mean, Divine even smoked Salem cigarettes because Divine smoked them. Noel Coward is also in this. He plays the Witch of Capri in a staggering scene. You'll see where he has a dinner of sea monster with Elizabeth Taylor, a lunch. And they asked Katharine Hepburn to play the part, and she turned it down, insulted to have been asked. I love that. The sets are amazing. The art direction of this movie, it suddenly caught on. There was an article in the New York Times about 6 months ago saying how this is the art film that everybody from Vogue is getting in there. Suddenly this is caught on, how Anna Wintour watches it every day and everything, which really made me angry, because I've loved this movie for years and everybody else hated it.
Because I was watching this for the first time, in honor of John and Divine, I decided I had to see it the way I knew they would have seen it for the first time. So I did something that is completely illegal in Canada. So when I'm talking about this, it's not scandalous. It's totally legal. I took some cannabis, and I was in a state of pleasant relaxation and slight euphoria as I watched the movie. And the thing that I found interesting was that, of course, it immensely helped watching the movie. But I also, yesterday, I decided I didn't watch the whole film over again, but I did revisit some key moments while I was sober. And at least a couple I actually preferred when I was sober, which was weird. Like, they suddenly, like, things that I had thought, like, oh, that's dumb when I was high, suddenly made kind of sense when I was watching them with, like, a clear head.
So my first viewing was at the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival. A few years ago, they played it as a midnight.
Yeah.
And I've been going for, this year, will be my fifth trip. And no other movie has become a running joke like it did at that festival, because there's a moment in the film where the camera pans away from Elizabeth Taylor while she's saying what. So, like, she's kind of squawking off camera, like not even the focus of the thing, and it just, like, wah, it trails off. So, like, whenever we needed to question something, that's how we would ask for clarity, was with this wah. And then also we just kind of walk by, and you know, if there was a lull in the conversation, we'd say boom and walk away.
Well, and also, like anyone who loves movie lines should absolutely watch this movie, because I wrote down some that, like what's human and inhuman is not for human decision. Like, as soon as I heard that, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna love this movie. Like, there's no way this movie's gonna be over and I'm gonna be dissatisfied. Like, any movie that has something like that in it is just purely made for me. But let's get into the nuts and bolts in that. It's it's one of those movies where the most interesting thing about it probably is the behind the scenes sort of stuff, because when you watch the movie, you like, if you know beforehand how expensive it actually was to make, it becomes absurd because there's no reason at all for it to have cost that much money. Like it's basically like shot on one location with a tiny like cast. So it should have you could make this today for less than $500,000.
However much it took to rent the cottage in Sardinia, really.
Yeah. It really there's no reason, but sort of once you decide, okay, we're going to cast the most famous couple in the world in order to be in this movie, then that they've basically signed their own death warrant when it came to sort of the budget and sort of how difficult it was going to make it and the way it was going to be perceived. And that, to me, it's the fascinating thing about the movie is that on the one hand, I haven't read the play, so I can't really judge. And I feel like parts of it must have been rewritten with Taylor in mind, because I get the sense that she should have been playing a much older character than she is. I think both of them he should be playing he should be Robert Redford.
He should be younger and she should be older.
Exactly. Yeah.
It should have been flipped. The casting problems were noted in most of the contemporaneous reviews. It helps to go back and give this movie some context. So Tennessee Williams wrote The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore, the original title, 1963, and it ran for 69 performances. There's an asterisk by those 69 performances in that advance reviews were scathing, but they would have been released during a newspaper strike, so nobody got to read them. So it played because people didn't have anybody to tell them not to go. Yeah,
based on Williams' name alone.
Right. So once word did get out, the production came to an abrupt halt, sort of like the post-opening weekend blues. Yeah. And Tennessee Williams rewrote the script with a kabuki framework and two actors playing stagehands commenting on the play as it happened on stage. So this might be the beginning of Statler and Waldorf.
Yeah.
Right here, Tennessee Williams. The revised version starred Tab Hunter and Tallulah Bankhead.
Yeah.
Tennessee Williams.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Tennessee Williams said that he wrote the character with Tallulah Bankhead in mind.
Yeah, and she was actually who I was thinking of when I was watching
this. It's hard not to.
Yeah.
But the problem, this one closed after 9 performances. The reviews got worse, if that's possible. Yeah. Most people complained that Tallulah was coked out of her mind.
Which was fair.
Yeah. Nobody could understand her, and she was not sober during any of the performances.
Yeah.
So, obviously, that led to a 2011 revival starring Olympia Dukakis.
Well, that's sort of like once you become as famous as Tennessee Williams, even your worst stuff is going to get revived. It is eventually.
And I believe Rupert Everett starred in a version as well that actually received some good reviews. I couldn't find anything really written
playing
about
Sissy or Christopher.
Playing Sissy, I believe.
Okay, that totally makes more sense to me than him playing Christopher.
Yeah, well, I had to do that because I read that as sort of like an anecdote on it was actually I was doing research on the 2011 revival, which nothing seems to have written about, so it kind of just disappeared. And then it was like, but it was revived with Rupert Everett. I'm like, okay, I've got some questions, but that seems to be him playing the Sissy role.
Yeah,
I would like if someone has more information, or maybe even attended a performance. You never know who's listening. That would be interesting. So we've got all this Tennessee Williams stuff going on with this just miserably failed stage production. But then you've got Joseph Losey, who has an entirely interesting career all on his own that also feeds into how this movie came to pass. This might be just a whole bunch of film geekery, but
Hey, I love film geekery.
And everyone just indulges for just a quick moment. Because I don't think Joseph Losey is a director that gets talked about much, and I personally didn't know anything about his history besides the actual work he'd done. So
I know him really only through his work with Taylor.
Yeah, so when I was going back here, I was like, well, this all seems to fit now. It makes so much sense in the context of Boom. So Joseph Losey studied film in the Soviet Union with Sergei Eisenstein. He also studied theater with Bertolt Brecht at the same time.
Yeah.
He moved to Europe after he was blacklisted in the 50s. He had joined the Communist Party in 1946 and had... at the time, accepted a long-term deal to direct for RKO. When RKO got wind of his name in the HUAC hearings, actually at that point it was Hughes. Yeah. Hughes had purchased RKO and immediately set out to eliminate all the quote-unquote leftists in the studio. I don't know how much of this is true, but it seems like something Howard Hughes would do. Yeah. He would test his employees with various productions. He would offer them jobs on certain movies, and if they accepted, they were okay. If they had issues, then they were leftists or commie and had to go. Yeah. So for those directors, he offered them a project called I Married a Communist. I don't know if there was an actual script. I would like to know if he actually had a dummy script for this fake movie called I Married a Communist.
I've already heard the title, and I want to see this movie.
But Losey turned it down, and Hughes let him run out his contract without giving him any work to do. So he was just sitting there on the lot with nothing to do. He fled to Europe later on in the 50s and finished his career basically working in the UK system. Yeah. Where he did most of his notable work. He was at one point hired by Hammer. He was slated to direct X the Unknown, but star Dean Jagger refused to work with a communist. Yeah. So Losey was removed and eventually was hired to direct The Dam for Hammer. He began working with Harold Pinter in the 60s. He did The Servant, Accident, and The Go-Between. And somewhere in the middle of all those, he found time to direct Modesty Blaise, 1966. Yeah.
Which is unfortunately terrible.
Totally jives with those three, which are like politics of class and sexuality in repressed England in the 19th century, 1960s, across the generations, really. I mean, it was just all about the repression. So, Modesty Blaise, perfect follow-up to that. Boom wasn't the first movie after Modesty Blaise, but it was very shortly thereafter. Mm-hmm. And if you've seen Modesty Blaise and you want to connect the dots between that and Boom in only a 2-year period, good luck. Your head will explode. It's not going to work. Yeah. But he's got this really interesting theater background working with Brecht, and you can see how Boom would have appealed to him. Yeah. So you've got these two really interesting personalities in Joseph Losey and Tennessee Williams. And then you add just gasoline to the fire with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Yeah. Miscast.
But here's my argument. They're miscast and perfectly cast. I don't think this film would work if it was actually like I do like this film. I do think it works in its own weird sort of mutant way, but only because of the charisma of its two leads. Because she is such an icon that it becomes easy to forget that she was actually a really good actress. And so like what she's given in this movie is so over the top that the degree of difficulty is so high that the fact that she actually pulls it off 60% of the time is amazing to me. Because I don't see Meryl Streep or anyone else like of that sort of caliber, Glenn Close, anybody like that, making this work. No one could make this work. So the fact that Elizabeth Taylor, miscast, is able to make so much of Sissy Goforth work and actually sort of a seemingly plausible character, like as much as she does, is kind of a minor miracle.
You mustn't call them that. It has a very insulting meaning.
I know what it means, Miss Black, and that's what I meant it to mean. Now tell them to bring the table over here so I can put my chair in the shadow when I want it in the shadow. My skin's too delicate to be in the sun for more than half-hour intervals. Now tell them what I want put on the table. a cold bottle of mineral water, suntan lotion, cigarettes, codeine tab, a bucket of ice, a glass, a bottle of brandy, my newspapers. The Paris Trib, the Rome Daily American, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Daily Express. It's that goddamn thing.
Something he gave me to give you. It seems he makes mobiles.
Does he seem like some kind of a nutcase to you?
No.
Help me out, will you? The sun's making me dizzy. Oh, God damn, you broke the skin with my ring. Bring a telex report out to me. Oh, shit and your mother! God damn it, I've signed myself into a criminal institution.
And add this to the fact that she is just dressed in these outfits that are, I'm a cis hetero man, but I have a very strong, like sort of gay aesthetic when it comes to this sort of thing. And to me, if you just if I was forced to just watch this movie with the sound off, I would be in heaven, just because the visual delight of it to me is so great. And 90% of that is just Taylor in these outfits that in the context of scene to scene make no sense whatsoever.
No, and it's the whole set design too. All this feeds, it's this barren, almost igloo-like castle on the edge of this cliff in Sardinia. Half the movie is on this exterior patio, which is just a white wall. And then you have just weirdness taking place on the patio. Like whatever she's wearing, Richard Burton walks around in the samurai costume for half the movie. There is a reason for it, but the reason doesn't really carry. Yeah. So he's just wearing it. And then you've got the monkey. There's a monkey. Yeah. And a bird. Like there's just things. And if you don't, I'm not going to say the sound doesn't make it weirder, but if you don't have the context, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Maybe we should rewind and talk about the bare bones spine of this movie. Yeah, the plot, as much as there is one. Overselling it. So Elizabeth Taylor plays Sissy Goforth, a reclusive. She's she's Citizen Kane. She's Charles Foster Kane. She's the wealthiest woman in the world, but they hint at I got the sense that she's a self-made. She didn't marry for money. Though she has 5 husbands, so you don't know where the money comes from necessarily. Yeah, yeah. And so she's living on this island that she's dubbed her own nation. She's got her own flag. Yeah. She does not receive visitors unless she's explicitly invited them, and then they make it clear that she doesn't invite anyone. Yeah. It's not spoiler to say that she is dying. The whole concept of the film is that she is aware of her health and that it is deteriorating rapidly. She is mesmerized by the memory of her dead poet, rock-climbing husband. Yeah, who died 5 days into their marriage, but she still kept his name. Right. And then Richard Burton playing a poet who is also called the Angel of Death because he visits old women before they die. He actually admits that he's more a professional house guest than he is anything else. It's just convenient that he's there when they die. But in social circles, he's been dubbed the Angel of Death. Yeah. He climbs up the rocks to the house. Is also a poet, so there's this connection between the dead husband and Richard Burton's itinerant poet who's done one book. And mobiles. And this mobile, yeah. And then there's a weird courtship where she refuses to see him and he's just sleeping. And that's the movie. Well, I mean, there's slightly more to it than that. Yes. There's a lot of philosophizing and there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of talking. The one thing we also mention is the other main character, which is Miss Black, or Blackie, as she's called, who is sort of she's Sissy's assistant. And the thing that I find confusing about her is because she's played by Joanna Shimkus, who these days is best known. She married Sidney Poitier about 8 years after this movie was made. And so that's sort of
this is like her movie career is more an asterisk than it is anything else. But the thing that I find bizarre is that she has this sort of unplaceable sort of European accent, which I think might be dubbed, because I know for a fact that she's from Halifax, which is a Canadian city where no one sounds like that. So I don't
think
know
anyone sounds like that, period, whether you're in Halifax or not.
But it wasn't like to me. It's like I wasn't sure if it was a case where she was cast purely for her looks and they got another actress to dub her.
It almost sounds like an Italian doing an English accent.
Yeah, like if this was sort of like a Carolyn Monroe situation, or like I know you're a big Bond guy, so I know like half the Bond girls speak with the same voice. So it might be one of those.
The early ones were all dubbed by the same actress. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a cast of servants on the island with her. So you've got the little person who controls what I can tell is an army of Cairn Terriers.
Oscar nominee Michael Dunn.
Right.
Yeah, he's the head of security.
Right, which really just involves rabid Cairn Terriers
and shoot stuff.
Right. Yes. And then Blackie, and the servants, and then Noel Coward shows up as
the Witch of Capri. To me, he was sort of like the other side of like sort of Richard Burton's character. Like he was another professional house guest, but like he was good for information if you needed it.
And Richard Burton can't get a meal to save his life.
Yeah. Well, and also it turns out that he actually is an angel of death.
Right. By the by.
Yeah. And that was something that I completely missed the first time. That was like sort of talking about it making more sense, is that like all the talking in at the end, I was not in a state to really comprehend what they were saying. I was just absorbing the beautiful images. I was only seeing it yesterday that I was like, okay, so he talks about like how he has this experience at this one of the first times he was like sort of a professional guest. He went to this Hindu had this Hindu experience and went to what was it, a nursing home where people were dying, and he saw this old man in the sea, and he helped the old man drown because the man clearly what he wanted. But before the old man drowned, he gave him all his cash. And so that became his sort of mission in life, was to sort of help old rich people die and get paid for it.
You got to have your thing. Let's take a moment to check in with Will McKinley on the Old Movie Weirdo hotline and see if he has any thoughts about Boom. All right, we'll have to check back with Will a little bit later. But for now, let's get back to Allan. And I believe the question in everyone's mind is Boom a comedy? Is it funny? Is it a comedy?
I'm saying yes and no, because there are definitely moments here that are supposed to be comedic. Like, to me, like, and that was what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about sort of like it being unintentionally funny, but also there being moments where this was clearly the wavelength they were on. And that, to me, that was most striking with the dinner sequence between Elizabeth Taylor and Noel Coward. Like, to me, this was two bitchy queens talking to each other. Like, this is like, if you took that scene and lifted it wholesale and put it into a John Waters movie, it would fit seamlessly.
They greet each other by yodeling at each other. He's driving up on the funicular.
Yeah.
And she's yodeling, he's yodeling, and you don't know why this is happening. Yeah. And he just arrives. And then at the dinner party you mentioned, he says, "Are we having Chinese?" Regarding her costume. She's wearing this huge
headdress,
ornate white headdress. If you've seen any images from Boom, you've seen the headdress.
Yeah.
It's not Chinese. It's a kabuki costume.
Yeah.
She spits back at him.
Which doesn't look like any kabuki costume I've ever seen, but still, we'll take it on faith.
And then she performs this weird kabuki-style dance before she stumbles into a chair. Yeah. And then she starts bitching at him about his blood transfusions.
Yeah.
She's living on blood transfusions, turn you into a vampire. It's just these individual lines. You remove any of them from context, and I'm like, that is you struggle to figure out how that was written dialogue in the movie.
Yeah,
and they're funny.
Yeah,
but if what's going on is not funny,
no, and that's sort of, and to me that was sort of like the thing that I appreciated the most is that it knows what it is and it doesn't care if you don't like it.
Right.
But at the same time, it costs so much money that that's a horrible way to make the movie, because if you don't care if people like it, then you're going to lose your shirt, because this is not playing to any sort of mainstream audience. You have to be high or gay or of a certain sort of peculiar mindset to see this working in any other way.
Yeah, and you just don't... It's one of those things where moment to moment you're watching it and you go back and forth on your own argument. Like, oh, yeah, this has got to be a comedy. Like, there's no way she bumped into the waiter and yelled, "Shit on your mother," and this is supposed to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
But then there's moments where you just feel like the whole thing's just super awkward and weirdly atonal.
Yeah.
And you can't. You're back in the, well, this has just got to be completely tone deaf. Like, what is it trying to do? What does it want to do? And then you start picking apart. Well, who's in on the joke?
Yeah.
Like, is Losey in on the joke? Is Tennessee Williams writing this comedy, and Losey's filming it straight? What's the disconnect?
Well, and I think it's hard because it's very complicated, because I know I've read a lot of stuff about the later period of Tennessee Williams' work, and one of the things I see a lot is people saying, like, I know this sounds like a comedy, but it's not. And I think that I'm not sure Williams at this point knew what was and wasn't comedy in his work.
I think he was rebelling against norms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that amused him.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, again, the words, if you go back down to the screenplay itself, the words that are being spoken, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
So you have to wonder what Tennessee Williams, or how he conceived this. And I think that's probably the most crucial part about trying to make heads or tails of Boom. And we'll never know, because nobody...
Yeah.
I mean, getting in the mind of Tennessee Williams, okay.
Well, and also they're all dead.
Right. That's
like we can ask Joanna Shimkus, but I doubt she knows.
I don't think she did. She played the whole thing straight.
Yeah.
And then again, you go back to, like, okay, so we do know that they were drunk while filming it, because, I mean, there's a lot...
They were the Burtons. Yeah.
Well, also, there was a lot written about how Losey opened every day with a Bloody Mary bar. Like, that's just how they started the workday.
Yeah.
So, and then then all this feeds into it with the legends of Liz Taylor and Richard Burton.
What do you think of of Burton's performance in this?
I like Burton in this movie, and I don't always like him.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I definitely feel he's miscast, but there are moments here where I actually think he nails the part, which is sort of a weird thing.
Right, he is miscast. It should have been a younger man, older woman. So that would have made more sense.
I keep thinking Robert Redford, because there's a famous episode of The Twilight Zone he was in where he basically played the Angel of Death.
Well, it would have been the right time for him too. Like 1968 would have been prime spot for him. I like what Richard Taylor does with it. I like the balance that he has. He's not winking at the audience, but he's the closest thing we have to a lifeline.
Yeah.
He's playing this with a steady air of
disbelief.
Right. You see that, well, this is ridiculous in his demeanor the whole time.
Yeah.
And Liz Taylor waffles between high melodrama and, like, gutter humor almost, because, like I said, the shit on your mother line is just straight vulgar.
Yeah.
But in the context of the surroundings and the setting, and it's really funny.
Yeah.
She has so many of these individual lines. Like, she's out there watching the skies, and she's shooting star. It's a memory.
Yeah. Shot. It's gone. Yeah, it's a memory. Yeah.
And then when she's screaming at Blackie, when she calls her up on the phone, when Blackie's about to have sex with the Richard Burton, and she calls her on the phone and said it's late. Yes, it's very late, Mrs. Goforth. This is dictation.
I think my favorite line of hers was what is usual is usually unimportant.
The one I had to write down and I circled a couple times: hot sun, cool breeze, white horses on the sea, and a big shot of vitamin B in me.
Hot sun, cool breeze, white horses on the sea, and a big shot of vitamin B in me. Now, I want to begin this chapter on a more serious note. The meaning of life.
You can tell by the way that, like, I think she's like dressed fabulously, but you can tell they're trying to hide the fact that she's a bit heavier than her Cat on the Hot Tin Roof years.
Yeah.
But she's still gorgeous. I mean, there's like a shot near the end where she's in the gown and you can sort of see through the light. And it's sort of like, I am not minding this at all. And,
no.
There's even like the line where and this is like why I feel like they rewrote it specifically for Taylor, because he gives her the line like, if you have a world famous figure, why be selfish with it?
Right. And that, there is something to that. Liz Taylor in this role at this time, she's not Cat in a Hot Tin Roof Liz Taylor. But like you said, she's not a wicked hag.
She's still Elizabeth fucking Taylor.
Exactly. There's no way in 1968 you can make Liz Taylor bad looking. There just isn't. And Roger Ebert had something interesting to say. His review it was a 1.5 star review.
Yeah.
Written September 24th, 1968. He opens it with this line: "There are different kinds of bad movies. Some are simply wretchedly bad. Others are bad but fascinating, and Boom is one of these. It isn't successful, it doesn't work, but so much money and brute energy were lavished on the production that it's fun to sit there and watch. Being so awkward and hopeless on its most fundamental level, this is a film for voyeurs." He furthers this voyeur argument by citing that, yes, we're supposed to see Elizabeth Taylor as this dying, fragile woman, but it's still Elizabeth Taylor, it's still Richard Burton, and she's still gorgeous, and you still cannot take your eyes off her.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, like, to the voyeur argument, like, to me, that's one of the reasons why I love classic cinema, and why I also love, like, sort of films that are famously regarded as failures, because at a certain point, a film can cease to be about itself as a film and serve as much as a documentary of a specific moment in time. And I think that's very much what this is. Like, this is one of those movies that I love because it could have only come at this extremely specific moment of time.
Right.
Like, Boom could only exist in 1968.
1969, and that's it. Beyond that window, this is still when American audiences were just becoming acclimated with some of the more experimental European movies. Like, there was that flush in the mid-'60s, and the American filmmakers hadn't really caught on. Like, they weren't into this art cinema mode. We were still in pop cinema. It wasn't until the 70s that American auteurism catched on. It's like, holy shit, there's a lot we can do now that we have this amazing freedom with the lift of the production code. But the European filmmaking didn't have that restraint.
Well, to me, that's what makes The Only Game in Town so fascinating, is because it's George Stevens trying to do a French New Wave movie. Yeah. And it doesn't work because he's George Stevens, and that's not the kind of movie he spent his entire career making.
And it's still interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting failure. I watched it for the first time recently, and I knew its reputation, nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, this isn't that bad. It's just not it's not what I expect from anyone here.
It would have been a great Rock Hudson and Doris Day movie.
Yeah.
But they decided, because it was following Bonnie and Clyde, that it had to be something bigger. It had to change cinema again. and they ended up with something that didn't really do anything.
Mm-hmm. And when this succeeds, it's because you have these voices who are more in tune with what they were tapping into, this European art cinema. And Losey was deep in it.
Yeah.
And without him filming this, I think, I can't even begin to fathom what a traditional American director would have done with this material.
Yeah, no, it would, like, the thing I like about Boom is that it is a disaster, but also it could have been 1,000 times worse.
It could have been. And we're watching it, and I watched it for the second time today, and I kind of undersold it the first time. The first time I was like, wow, that's a magnificent disaster. Like, full stop. Yeah. Part of it was because I was delirious after watching movies for 15 hours, and at midnight to 2 o'clock are not your most receptive moments of theater going. But it still came through. Like, I still got the vibe that John Waters had prefaced. Yeah. In this viewing, I saw a little bit more of the movie that succeeded, that had a particular vision.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's gorgeous. Like, it's really well shot. There are only the only things that really stand out to me as sort of like, I don't know why that's there, is that there are some lingering close-ups and shots on this crystal candelabra that you're supposed to have some significance. And I
don't think it does. It does. Those zooms happen so frequently. Yeah. And at times they do come back and pay off. I mean, there is a focus early on. You focus specifically on the ring, like she's in there, she's in bed wailing about pain, injection, and she's calling up, and she puts her hand up and zooms in on the ring. But it does that 5 or 6 times throughout the movie, and it's weird.
Well, the ring actually is important, right? Because the ring it plays out at the end. I literally clapped at that moment watching it at home by myself, because I just love the idea of, like, you could tell that somebody was like, okay, we've got Elizabeth Taylor wearing the most famous ring in the world. We need to get a fucking close-up of this ring.
Multiple times, too. As much as possible. It should have had billing.
Yeah.
But it happened, like, so that made sense. Like, the ring close-up, got it. Yeah. But like you said, the chandelier gets a close-up. I think at one point a lamp gets a close-up. Like, we zoom in on Liz Taylor's eyes at one point, and it's not in focus.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier the pan where Taylor's still talking, and then she's still talking off camera. Like, it wasn't like a cut to a reaction shot. It's a pan away from her, and sometimes that serves a specific purpose. It didn't do anything. It was just a pan away from the focus.
The one that struck me was there's a moment where she's basically her one attempt to sort of seduce Burton, and she talks about how her bedroom is filled with great art, and then she goes, including me, and then it cuts to to a shot of her from behind, and she goes, included. And I got the sense that, like, at some point she just screwed up their line, and that was the only way they can make the edit work.
It's clear that this was something, whether it was like they didn't want to do multiple takes, like there's lines that are messed up. She flubs a line and just resays it at one point.
Yeah.
Is this part of what they wanted? Did they want this weird naturalistic dialogue? There's scripted dialogue that doesn't go anywhere too.
Yeah. And that's sort of the thing that is that, to me, this is why I love failures, because to me they're far more interesting than successes, because the questions I get, like, sort of watching something like this are like, if I had chosen, say, like, as an example, Lawrence of Arabia as a cinema shame, like, I'm guessing that I would not be going like, I don't understand, like, why did they do this and that and this and this? Whereas to me, like, the conversation around something like this, where it's this whole unique thing that has never been replicated, is really sort of could only exist in this one specific moment. And it's sort of, to me, it's like as special as a movie that had been perfectly made and did exactly what it wanted and knew exactly what it wanted to be. Like, to me, it's a case of a failure that is as interesting, if not more interesting, than a success.
I agree, and I don't mean to shame all future guests, but this is where it's at right here. Just this absurdity. Here's the line I wrote down. They're walking through the house, and she says, "You mean you burnt out as a poet?" And he just says, "What?" And she repeats the line. You mean you burn out? She raises her voice like he just didn't hear her. When does that happen in movies? Like, you either hear the line or you don't. If there's a reason for saying what, it's because you need it rephrased. You don't hear the same line over again. It's to put emphasis on a certain piece of information. There's no information. There's no point.
It's one of those things where I could see, like, if it happened, like, by accident and the director was sort of, like, making a different kind of movie and was like, oh, this is great. That was a really real moment. It really sort of sells the reality. But this is not a movie where the dialogue is meant to be real at all. Like, everyone speaks in metaphor and analogy and, like, it's nothing is as it is. So having sort of a real sort of authentic moment just doesn't fit. It only makes the other moments seem less authentic.
Right. Then you start picking apart other things. Like, okay, it seemed intentional at the time, but I'm not so sure. I don't know if that was just like, oh, that was a botched take and Liz doesn't want to do it over again. Like, you have no idea. And the possibilities just flood. And there's I just had these in my notes next to it. So they're near the end of the movie. They're sitting down near her fireplace. He sits down first, and she says, "Do you sit while a woman stands?" And he doesn't do anything. He just, sit down. All right, well then sit down.
Like, and talking, like, we've already mentioned it, but for me, like, one of the, like, hilarious moments is her final monologue, which I think up till the actual saying of the title of the play is amazing. Like, I think this is sort of like, okay, this is like, you could show this, like, out of context and people might be tricked into thinking this was a good movie.
Well, it's an acting class monologue. I mean,
it's an acting class monologue.
It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, but then she says the milk train doesn't stop here anymore, which doesn't make any sense based on what we've already seen. Apparently, like you said, there was a line before like that. Apparently, we needed that other line because it's a total non sequitur.
It doesn't, like, there's no evidence that there was ever a milk train. Like, why? Yeah. Is this a metaphor for something? Because if it is, there's no reason to, like, there's nothing going on here.
Well, if she wasn't on an island in the middle of nowhere, like, if she was in a city and there might have still been like
if this
a milk
is like
train.
A suburb, maybe she's gone like it's a slightly remote suburb. All right, okay,
yeah.
Without other context, that would have applied. But here, it's like, are we talking about lactation for some reason?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm all dried up. Like, wait.
Yeah. She was what, 38 when this was made, or
yeah.
I
don't know if it's 30, but that's about how she was.
That's around their age. But it's sort of, then that's sort of one of the reasons why it's sort of like, I think Taylor is underrated is that, like, you see something like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and you think, oh, that was just made in that period of her life where she was like that. And then, no, like, she was actually only 30 when she made that movie. And that's makeup. And that's the reason why it was shot in black and white, was so the makeup wouldn't show.
Right. And
that she's actually giving a real performance.
There's a tendency to dismiss that era entirely because it's just like, well, that's senile Elizabeth Taylor. I'm like, no, that was persona and character, and that was big. I mean, she was a legendary figure, and she was embracing it.
Exactly, and that's why I find as I watch more of her stuff that is sort of deemed sort of the bad years, I find myself really enjoying her performances. So I feel like at a certain point she couldn't, because she was Elizabeth Taylor, people were never going to give her a serious break. Like, she'd become too big to be taken seriously.
Right. That's probably true, and I think she would have suffered intensely from just the negativity surrounding, appearance, just the way she looked. It still happens today. I mean, when does a jaw-droppingly beautiful woman ever get respect for her acting unless she disfigures herself on screen?
Exactly. Yeah.
So like Charlize Theron wouldn't get an acting commendation unless she stops looking like Charlize Theron.
Well, like the example I always give is I think Michelle Pfeiffer is one of the funniest female comic actors ever. And no one gives her any credit for that because she looks like Michelle Pfeiffer. So the fact that we're laughing at her, we don't even register. But you watch something like Married to the Mob, and I'm sorry, that's one of the great comic performances of all time.
Well, I mean, look at what she did with the Catwoman character in Batman Returns. I mean, that
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's a very complicated role, and it's Michelle Pfeiffer and a comic book movie, so we're going to dismiss those performances. But all of the central performances in that movie are terrific, and she's the best one.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's tough out there for the beautiful people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going back to Elizabeth Taylor, she's embracing what she's given, and she was never really given respect as an actress, and she was. So what do you do if you have this personality, you're frustrated with the way you're being treated, you're frustrated with the roles you're being given, you blow it up. You can still you're still an attraction, but maybe you're at least enjoying it.
Yeah. Well, I get the sense that she's having fun, and she might not have, like, she may just not, be good at, because she was such a professional and was just a trooper. She was, well, I guess professional is the wrong word for her to use at this point. Like, she was pretty difficult to work with, but in terms of actually getting a good performance on camera. But she just sort of, it's just willing to go there and sell it in a way I don't see any other actress from this period really working. Because even if you were to cast it like a Tula Bankhead, a Joan Crawford, a Bette Davis from this period, it would have become like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, but in the worst way possible. It would have become camp in a way that made you wince rather than camp. It would have become
an intentional camp, and intentional camp is bad. It's not camp anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. If you even think about who else could have done it, and I'm not. I mean, we've talked about them. It's Tula Bankhead and Liz Taylor. I mean, I don't know who else can play that level.
Yeah, and that's why. Like, I definitely, like, as I said before, I think it's a case of a movie where it's miscast but also perfectly cast at the same time.
We talked about the drag component of the performance too.
Yeah.
And John Waters has spoken at length about that.
Well, you can, like, because I know that one of Divine's early inspirations was Liz Taylor. That because I know he actually used that pronoun, so people don't jump on me. I'm just doing what Divine wanted. Yeah. He based his early persona on Elizabeth Taylor. And if you actually see, like, sort of like, if there's that great documentary about him, they have pictures of him in his Elizabeth Taylor drag, and he actually really nailed it. And I think you can see that sort of in this movie more than probably any other from this period. That sort of very much that drag queen sort of persona, like when she's wearing the headdress. I'm also thinking like that her final outfit where she has this long extension wig that just comes out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And like, it would have taken them 6 hours to put that on, yet all of a sudden she just has it.
Puts it on for the seduction.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that in mind when I first watched it. I didn't really pick up on it. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in so many other things with this movie, but when I was rewatching it again, it's all right there. Like, especially when you're talking about that dinner scene with Noel Coward. And you just have two queens bitching about the world.
That was one of the things that struck me, like, thinking back on the Medved sort of view of it, is that they were shocked that Noel Coward was playing like a male character when clearly this part was written for a woman, like as if this was like an incredibly like as if this was a huge like what the fuck on the part of the filmmakers. And it was just a case of like someone in that period not being able to, sort of recognize that this was a thing you could actually do.
Oh yeah. And I love that it's Noel Coward too. It's just, right. That's the right casting right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, there's just so much. I hope people do take away the fact that we do recommend this as a viewing. Like, this is. Oh yeah, no, this is a gotta watch. Yeah, this is one of those movies that has to be seen to be believed. I mean, we can talk about it for hours and not get tired of picking apart individual lines and moments, but you really got to see it.
And if you're in Canada and you can legally order pot from a website, as I can, then I highly suggest that you do that for your first viewing of this film. I think that it will make it a very memorable experience.
And if you can somehow see it on a big screen with a bunch of people who know what they're getting themselves into, I think that's also that's ideal.
I'm very jealous. I would love to see this on a big screen.
John Waters still occasionally brings it around. So if you're lucky enough to be around John Waters and he's got it in tow, then definitely make every effort to be there, because I can imagine. I mean, the TCM crowd was probably a little subdued. I don't know if a whole lot of them knew what they were getting into. More of them appreciated it after it was done, probably, than an average audience. But if you get an audience that knows what they're there for and is ready to embrace the eccentricities on screen, that's ideal. This
is like I count myself as sort of amongst like a sort of I think a small film like sort of community that for me I love the celebration of icons. Like, to me, it's all about iconography. Mm-hmm. It's about sort of seeing larger than life personas magnified and sort of just documented. And to me, that's what Boom is. It's a perfect documentation of the biggest celebrity couple of the 20th century. And they made a lot of movies together. But I think this one may be the one that sort of truly captures the bizarre nature of the relationship in a way no other did. Because the good ones, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, is definitely the best film they made. But it doesn't really, we assume they fought a lot, but they weren't George and Martha. They were Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And in this movie gives us Richard Taylor and Elizabeth Burton fighting it out to the death, literally.
Yep.
And I think it just sort of captures their personas in a way that I'm not even sure is intentional, but is definitely, I found thrilling every second of it.
I think that should cover it all. I think we did a good job here. I think we should at least have converted a few new Boomalites, or there's got to be a name.
Now that it's coming out on Blu-ray,
right.
I had an excuse not to see it. No one does anymore.
Right, and it's going to be it's a Shout Factory disc, right? Yeah. So
it's going to be easy to get. It's not like an obscure one that you're going to have to hunt out for. You can get this movie now.
And that's coming out later this year. No more excuses. Although the current DVD looks pretty good for just a slap and dash, burn on.
There are a couple of cigarette burns, but that's about it.
So, boom.
The
sound of wait. I don't want to screw up the big line. Holy shit! I almost screwed up the big line. I wrote it down just so I'd make sure to have it right, and now my writing is too atrocious and I can't find it.
It's the sound of.
Oh man! If we screw this up, the whole podcast is shot. The sound of each moment of still being alive. The shock.
Yeah.
No, the shock. I got to write better. The shock of each moment of still being alive. There. And I do hope you walk by someone, and if there's a lull in the conversation, just say boom and walk away.
Yeah.
That's how real world translation for boom.
Yeah.
All right. This was great. We should find more amazingly terrible movies to talk about in the future, because that might be your specialty on Cinema Shame.
I'm glad to have a niche.
Oh, the John Barry score.
Oh, I loved it.
So to reduce it down to the purest description, I came up with sitars and merry-go-rounds.
Yeah, that's 100% it. And I loved it. If I could find this, if I could find the soundtrack on vinyl, which I don't even know if it exists, but if it does, I want it.
I think you found your Christmas present.
Yeah.
Somewhere out there, there's got to be a copy of Boom on vinyl. I can't imagine. It's a John Barry score, for God's sakes. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like he was an unknown. I mean, this is in the middle of him doing his best Bond scores.
Yeah.
It's crazy that it's John Barry. But there are moments, especially early on in the film, where I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a John Barry cue.
Yeah.
They come through when it's not full of sitars and calliope music.
Yeah. Well, and I honestly love the Calliope music. Like, there are moments where it's just,
It fits.
especially at the beginning, where at the beginning it really fits. Like, they're setting up sort of the atmosphere, and it actually really works.
I would love to know the creative process that got to the Calliope music, because the sitars make sense, the eccentricity, like having the musicians on set with the sitars. Okay. But then this whimsical like there's just a merry-go-round down on the beach somewhere off screen.
Yeah.
And she at times she starts and stops it. Like, she has a radio and she turns it on and off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's my favorite part, is that like it's this absurd music and it's diegetic.
Right. She walks over and turns it off. I'm like, wow, that's
part
amazing.
Of the world.
You just have that. That's like your iTunes setting is like for the Calliope channel.
But almost that plays into the idea of, like, did they know what they were doing? Because they're almost acknowledging that this is a carnival, that this is like a circus that we're seeing.
Maybe that's the secret to it all. That's the key.
Yeah. Barry knew.
He may have been the only one, but Barry got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. And we'll have to work on our next idea. I don't know how we can top Boom, but we'll have to work on that.
I'm sure we can find something. I'll check out the Medved books. See what lost classic I haven't seen that I suspect that they were wrong about.
We'll work on question mark films next.
Yeah. What?
Cinema Shame lives on the web at cinemashame.wordpress.com. Thank you for being a Cinema Shame listener. Thank you for being a new Cinema Shame listener. We'll be back in a couple weeks with a new episode of the podcast when you'll get to hear Stephanie Crawford say,
yeah, you kind of have to go into this film as a space baby. Just pure and open and gently floating towards it.
Soderbergh's claim that famous Harold Ramis was the greatest director in the history of cinema.
You have chosen wise.